Well, unbelievable scenes today when the ABC boss, David Anderson, fronted politicians in Canberra to defend the national broadcaster's stunning bias. What a farce, including an amazing admission about that ABC report that claimed a meeting of Alice Springs residents was full of white supremacists. Turned out the reporter wasn't even there. If you want to understand why the ABC is controlled by its hard left staff and not by the man supposedly in charge, keep watching. I'll focus on just 3 examples today from Anderson's appearance before a Senate Estimates Committee that should make every Liberal and Nationals MP realise the ABC is out of control and the next time they're in power, the coalition must fix it or sell it. Now, let me first remind ABC defenders that the ABC does operate under rules different to those for private media like Sky News. All taxpayers, me included, you, Conservatives, we all have to fund it, $1.1 billion a year. And in return, the ABC must, under its charter and editorial policies, be impartial. But as everyone knows, it just breaks that deal. It's allowed its left-wing staff to effectively steal that money to preach their politics. For instance, Preachers Non-Stop on global warming, and now crusades for Labor's Voice, its planned Aboriginal-only parliament. Well, today, Liberal and Nationals MP confronted Anderson with some of the most recent examples. Example 1. Last month, the ABC's AM program ran an astonishing report in a meeting of about 3,000 residents from Alice Springs who were frightened by the violence and stealing there by Aboriginal men and children after the lifting of booze bans. The report interviewed only people smearing that meeting as full of white supremacists.
It was really a disgusting show of white supremacy.
Clearly all around white supremacy.
And I am way more concerned about the danger posed by those people in there, those white people.
That's just some of it, and this biased report caused outrage. This is how David Anderson today explained how it happened.
While I think an error was made with regard to that, I do think that the systems and processes we have in place failed in that those checks and measures did not pick up an issue with that story before it was included in the AM package. So,
hanging and anonymous systems and processes were at fault. Well, look, that doesn't even come close to explaining this. This idea that there's a room full of white supremacists. Now, how could the ABC reporter think that was a fair description? How could the ABC AM producers who put it to air think, yep, that's likely, that's fair? How could ABC presenter Sabra Lane introduce it without saying, well, that doesn't actually sound right, white supremacists? All that can only be explained by bias. And remember, the ABC defended that report for days. That can only be explained by people in the ABC thinking, yeah, residents scared of being bashed and robbed. Well, may well be white supremacists, really. Sounds right, checks for me, checks a box. And that's a story, of course, that also helps put the case for The Voice. So put it to air. But there's more. Even now, more than 2 weeks later, Anderson says his staff hasn't yet told him how it was that no one at the ABC stopped that smear going to air. And remember, he's not just the managing director of the ABC, but its editor-in-chief as well.
Mr. Anderson,
yep.
You are the editor-in-chief. The buck stops with you. Surely by now you would have established what happened on that day. I mean, I called for an investigation within days of this report going to air. I mean, that is surely an incredible oversight by you as editor-in-chief. Not to know what happened.
I've asked for that. I haven't had it given to me yet. I do expect to have it soon.
I don't know whether the ABC staff are snowing their boss, denying him information, but under more questioning, it did turn out that Anderson did know a little more than he'd been letting on. None of the ABC reporters based in Alice Springs are Aboriginal, and the ABC flew in someone from Sydney who did identify as Aboriginal, but oh dear, she couldn't get into that meeting.
Ms Williams did try to get into the meeting, did try to get in, but was not allowed into that meeting, was outside of the meeting while the meeting occurred, and recorded those people leaving the meeting. We did have other ABC people inside the meeting from the Alice Springs team.
So Ms Williams, reporting on the meeting, never attended the meeting?
Reporting on the meeting with other information from the Alice Springs team, yes, as a combined report, but no, she did not attend the meeting.
Now, some people might have assumed from that answer that, there's maybe, I don't know, nasty whites at that meeting keeping out this Aboriginal journalist. But under yet more questioning, it turned out that Anderson hadn't quite told the full story then either. Here he goes again.
I do understand there was something problem with parking and the timing of arriving at the doors, but and could not get into the meeting. But again, we did have other reporters.
So is it because she couldn't find a car park, or is it because someone stopped her from getting into the meeting, or is it because she didn't get there in time?
I do not believe that it was that somebody stopped her from getting into the meeting, rather than the doors were closed and no one else could get in.
So picture this. The ABC relied on its report on that meeting, not on the local ABC journalists who knew their town and were at the meeting, but on the blow-in from Sydney who couldn't find a way to the parking even and wasn't at the meeting because she couldn't drop a car anywhere. Where's the free spot? And why did it do that? Why did it make that choice? Well, if I had to guess, maybe it's because the ABC journalists inside were white and the one outside was Aboriginal. And maybe she was just a bit more radical than the locals. Could that be it? Was racism part of their decision-making? Second example, much shorter. As you know, Professor Bruce Pascoe has for decades falsely claimed to be Aboriginal and misrepresented or even invented evidence for his Dark Emu bestseller to falsely claim Aborigines had actually been farmers, living in houses, in towns of 1,000 people, with pens for animals. And what's more, for years the ABC has promoted Pascoe, this fake Aborigine, and his fake history in more than a dozen videos made for schools. And today the ABC boss was asked about that.
What work is the ABC doing to include criticisms of Pascoe's claims on the education website or remove them altogether?
Well, I don't believe we're doing any work at the moment, Senator, but I will come back to you on notice about
Thank you.
What we have there.
And if you could tell me when you're expecting that work to be completed, please.
Well, I'll come back to you with questions on notice when I'm advised by the Chair that I'm required to do so.
I'm stunned. Probably not doing anything to correct all that propaganda pumped into the schools, but he doesn't really know anyway. I mean, here's the ABC's editor-in-chief. And the Bruce Pascoe hoax is the biggest controversy in our publishing history today. Probably, I don't know, probably ever. A hoax promoted by the ABC. And he doesn't know if the ABC is correcting the false claim that it's been pushing into schools. Seriously. And lastly, last November, here on Sky News and in columns published around the country, I protested against the disgusting smear on the ABC of Senator Jacinta Nampijinpa Price, who opposes Labor's voice to Parliament and seems to be fair game for the ABC to take shots at. The Australian also reported this particular smear, and today, more than 2 months on, Nampijinpa Price confronted the ABC boss about it. She was passionate and magnificent.
In November, Patricia Karvelas, interviewing Noel Pearson, chose to listen to his views on myself, being described as being trapped in a redneck celebrity vortex. Again, another stereotype. That I was being used by right-wing think tanks to punch down on black fellas. At no point did Ms Karvelas attempt to intervene and or challenge Mr Pearson's views, but accepted them wholeheartedly. I think it's utterly disgraceful that this sort of ongoing behaviour is allowed to continue, that does perpetuate stereotypes and doesn't allow for fair and just representation of our communities, but instead plays off the race card, which is contributing to divide in our country.
And here's the ABC's boss's response. You know, he didn't say, admit to the obvious, listen, that's yet another example of our outrageous bias. This man, who's the ABC's editor-in-chief as well, didn't even know of this controversial smear, broadcast by his own network, reported across the country in TV and in print.
With regard to the interview that you talk of, I'll look into that. I'm concerned by what you've just put to me, and I'll take that away and have a look at it, and I'll get back to you on notice once we've assessed it, because, yeah, I do share your concern.
Okay, at least David Anderson today said he was concerned about that smear broadcast by the ABC of a Conservative who opposes The Voice. But the rest of us should also be alarmed and disgusted that our taxes are funding such a left-wing propaganda outfit. Oh, I hear an objection.
Reject the notion that we're a propaganda platform.
Oh, he rejects it. But Mr. Anderson, do you even listen to what your paid propagandists put to air? Do you actually have any clue?